is Thomas DeSouza Jr., aka Mustached Tom, here to review an animated film called Ploey, You Never Fly Alone. So it starts off with some birds flying off in V formation, and these two vultures, which we never really see throughout the movie much of, complain about these birds' return. But then we cut to our main villain of the movie named Shadow, who is a hawk. And he wants to eat these little red birds. Simply known as plover birds, if I heard that right over and over again in the movie. Nonetheless, some of the upper birds that are up above start to fall for this little decoy bird, and they start to all scatter about. These two parent birds, land safely, but they talk about how they lost some of the other birds in the process of trying to land safely. But then cut to this radio bird who, again, is one of those things that is just in the movie really quick and just kind of is taken out after that little bit. And thus our main character is born, and of course his name is Ploey. And the movie kind of skims over, I guess, time, or we just hear the mother say that, oh, time has passed so fast, and then we see him sort of just already talking, pretending to be like other birds. And then his father wants him to train his son in the ways of survival, gathering food, stuff of that nature. So we cut to these 5 fat birds who want to move into this little house and see how fast they can get kicked out. But their significance is very minuscule at the grand scheme of things. He then meets a female bird, the one with the blue eyes on the cover there, named Cloveria. And she sort of taunts him to play around for a bit. So he chases her about. And then they take in the little worm that they find in the sand, in the dirt, and then they end up kissing each other rather quickly. So the shipping, they're just already in love, I guess. No need to, have them interact too much. They're already in love. So yes, that happens. Then the decoy tries to, I think he was trying to trick the father into giving him more information. I'm not entirely sure what the point of this decoy was talking to the father, but regardless. So they flee about, and she, Cloveria, kind of goes back to what she was doing with him, and they hold feathers for a bit. Meanwhile, the father plans a trap, for Shadow, and he talks very briefly about wanting Plover to end up being like him, and he's sort of on board with it. But as they're moseying on about, we meet a third bird, sort of alpha bird, I guess, or the bigger bully character, quote-unquote bully character, whose name is eventually revealed by Ploey to be named Slowy. I guess that's his actual name. I'm not really sure. That's what Ploey calls him, but I'm not sure if that's his actual name or not, but I guess for the sake of review, I'll just call him that, since, again, he never refers to himself by his name. He never properly introduces himself, so I can only go off of what I know, so there's that. Anyways, Ploey is then set up for this flying lesson with all these other birds, but freezes up. He's at the top of this little cliff, and he's just kind of standing there as all the other birds have already landed, and Shadow arrives on the scene. And he catches Ploey in the process of him falling down, and gets caught by Shadow. But Ploey manages to fall down, and the father kind of comes in, and they battle up in the sky, but all we see come down is a single feather drop, implying that the father sacrificed himself to save the son, and the son kind of dreads that fate and kind of goes into this sort of give-up mode. And his future lover, I guess, Cloveria, tries to cheer him up, but he's kind of in the down place for a bit. But she does eventually bring him back up to the rock eventually. And right before he can jump, a cat chases him into this house where the 5 fat pigeons we saw earlier, or birds, were trying to get into. So he manages to get in there and ends up in the cage. So he manages to slide down and make his way back out as he sees that all the other birds are getting ready to fly off south for the winter. So Ploey loses the grip of his father's feather and starts to chase after it after getting out of the house. And all the other birds have already left, and Cloveria assumes, because the last thing she sees is, the Shadow getting to him, so she assumes he's dead at this point. So he joins the fat birds again, and they give him instructions to go to this place called Paradise Valley, where all the other birds have already gone, and shows him via picture of how to get there. So Ploey sets off, starting to walk and climb his way there, and it starts to snow. So he hides under a rock and then continues to walk for a bit, and then sees Shadow sort of meandering about in the sky. And as he avoids Shadow this time around, he manages to get into a cave where he meets this white bird. Thus, the white bird tries to, get him out at first. And it says it's better off to be alone and stuff of that nature. But Ploey stays anyway, regardless, and we get introduced to Gyron. So he eventually says he will guide Ploey once he explains that Shadow is out and about. And they see some fox tracks, and continue to make their way to the top of the mountain. And Gyron explains his plan for Ploey to be this decoy while he sets up these explosions that were left behind by the humans. Unfortunately, he sets one off by accident or by purpose, I forget which one it was, and it sets them down. So Ploey, seeing that he can't really do much, he decides that he's going to end up being the decoy for this little plan. And he kind of imagines how the plan's going to go for a bit, and then he hears a sudden call for help, and the movie kind of derails, where we see him go to this little mouse, who Ploey once again names the character Mousy. So he saves Mousy to get to the other side of this little glacier, but then ends up falling almost into the water. He's like on this little sliver of ice, and he's heading downstream and ends up going down. But Gyron saves him before he falls completely and warms him up. Gyron talked about, while they continued to make their way into another cave, that he actually had kids, and that how Shadow killed them after he failed at being a distraction. And Ploey explains how his father was also taken away by Shadow as well. So the bonding begins. And Gyron then begins to explain essentially heaven, and how the birds that have passed on are watching over them, essentially. He never really says it, but that's what it implies, essentially. And then he begins to sing the one of the songs that they actually, I guess it's an original song made for this movie, about not flying alone. We then get a moment where that's happening. They're sleeping for a bit, and then suddenly the fox attacks Gyron and takes him off. But before that happens, Ploey was left with a simple conch shell. So he blows into it eventually, and then several mice arrive on the scene. So we cut to the fox, who's now essentially talking to the camera like it's a cooking show. And then the family of mice make their way and act as a decoy while Ploey makes his way to Gyron and kind of manages to get him out. So the mice fake out the fox at their last little bit. And meanwhile, Ploey makes his way as the winds grow harsher in the winter, and he can't find Gyron anymore. So he kind of just moves along ahead alone, and ends up on this ridge, and finds a new cave, and ends up falling asleep, where he manages to meeting up with Shadow and, I believe, Shadow's girlfriend or wife, or something of that nature. He says darling, so I'm not sure which it implies. But that other hawk is trapped in ice. So Shadow sees this going on, ended up seeing Ploey, and they go at it for a bit, but then Gyron arrives back on the scene, somehow knowing where they were, so there's that. And then they fight on for a bit. And Ploey tosses another bomb at the ice, and they end up all kind of getting blown away. And Gyron ends up, like, sleeping for a moment. It's supposed to be like, oh, he's kind of dead, but then he ends up waking up and then falling back asleep eventually. Anyways, Ploey looks up to the stars as he makes his way into this mountainous area where the rocks make these scary shapes, and he's trying to make his way. And while he's sort of on his own now, he kind of looks into this water, seeing the sort of, I guess, his vision of what he thinks is happening. Seeing Cloveria falling in love with Slowey, as he finally refers to him in the first time in this movie. And he kind of just says, something along the lines of, she's mine, or something. Which, at first I was like, ooh. But, technically, I guess she did at some point say that they were a item. She did say to Slowey, I guess, that they were technically an item already. So, I don't know. That was a weird moment. Anyways, so he ends up sort of continuing on, and this other little song plays, not sung by him, but this sort of background song, and he eventually drops into the snow, kind of just giving up, and eventually a random moose appears and picks him up. They eventually make their way to the valley, and he brings them to an area where one of the mice and the previous decoy bird end up, and he's just like totally not even a decoy bird anymore. He's just like, man, life is cool and stuff. He kind of like becomes that kind of character. Unless it's another bird, I'm just getting it mixed up, whatever. So, anyways, they try to bring Ploey back to life after seeing his condition, and he does shortly get up afterwards. Not too much time passes where everyone thinks he's dead. And Ploey helps the various animals out, and then they sort of just mess around and dance about, sort of wasting some time there. And eventually, I guess there's some sort of time skip because spring is already happening in the next day. And this one wise sheep talks to him about flying, and he says that he is willing to sacrifice himself for love, and for that love being for Cloveria at this point in time. So she kind of guides him into making his way up to the hill, to the top of this hill, and he kind of like finally lets go of the feather of his father. I'm not sure how he still had it after all that time, but he kind of just takes it out of the ether, and he dives down and finally manages to fly on his own. So he sets off trying to get the help from the others, but none of them want to help. So he sets off on his own and finds that Gairon has made his way back to the first area in the movie. So Ploey sets himself up as a decoy and sets out. So Shadow gets his claws on Clavoria and is quickly saved by an incoming Ploey. And they try to trap him with the help of Gairon, and they fail. And then Shadow traps Ploey, but he manages to get out then. So it's a bit of a back and forth. Shadow and Gairon fight off for a bit. And then the tables turn once again, with Shadow now getting trapped inside the house, but he manages to get out. So Ploey sets out again. Gairon throws some bombs his way, catches him, and Claveria sets back up with him, and she swoops along with Ploey back and forth, distracting Shadow until he hits the base of a bell and falls into a dirt pile. Some of the dirt ends up on him, but he kind of wakes up from it, and then Gairon jumps down with a wheelbarrow in tow, falling along with him, completely crushing Shadow underneath. So Ploey hugs his mom, and then checks quickly on Gairon, who says he will return home. So Ploey says his goodbyes to Gairon, and then talks to Cloveria about him assuming that she moved on, but she's like, no, I want to be with you. And then she's like, come on, chase me, or whatever. Kid chase from earlier in the movie. And they set off into the sky together, and the movie ends. And that was Ploey, You Never Fly Alone. The animation was nice, and the movie was simplistic enough. It was okay, I thought. Simplistic story, sort of the adventurer's tale, and the main character sort of meets other characters along the way. Kind of has that setup to it. You have sort of the random encounters of Gairon arriving from kind of out of nowhere, as sort of just like these little things to help set up the end of the movie, I guess. So, it does a little bit of cheating along the way, but I think it gets there. And yeah, that was Ploey, You Never Fly Alone. And I'll give this movie a solid 6 out of 10. I do think that some of the other bits kind of hold it back, but I think it's okay enough. I think it's harmless enough. I thought it was okay. And that was my review of Ploey, You Never Fly Alone. And if you enjoyed this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out that link in the description or head over to my Patreon page, and any donations are greatly appreciated. Until next time, everyone, bye-bye.